Good afternoon, everybody. It's fantastic to be here, and thank you for Gunhild and the team for organising this wonderful event. I would like to invite my panel onto the stage. We have Diane Holdorf, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer and Vice President of Environmental Stewardship, Health and Safety at the Kellogg Company. Please take a seat. We have Anne Roulin, Vice President, Nutrition, Health and Wellness and Sustainability at Nestlé. We have Dr. Mahmood Khan of Pepsi, Vice Chairman and Chief Scientific Officer, Global Research and Development. And finally, Emmanuel Vargon, the Vice President, Global Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at Danone. Welcome. So, panelists, what we've been hearing about these last 2 days are the importance of us all eating a better diet within planetary boundaries. And we know from the evidence that that means we're going to have to improve the food environments around people. Will Mozambique, urban slums in Brazil, right out here in Sweden, small town in India, whatever, we need to have food environments around people that deliver and enable and encourage healthier, better diets. So tell me, share with the audience what your vision is for what this food environment should look like, Diane.
Sure, thank you. You know, our emerging market team at Kellogg have done a lot of research on this. What does it mean for having this quickly urbanizing group of up-and-coming consumers who want to join with those of us more Northern Hemisphere consumers in success for themselves, but more importantly for their kids? And we talk a lot about the fact that we're going to have 9 to 10 billion people by 2030. What we haven't quite unlocked yet is the fact that 1.6 billion by 2025 are going to be moving from poverty to the emerging middle classes. And they're going to want food solutions that they aspire to and that deliver health for their kids. We have to be thinking as food companies, what's our role in enabling this nutrition transition in a society where we have intense pressure on resources, natural resources, as well as dietary challenges that we have to help and play a role in addressing. So our vision is really how we work together through industry platforms like World Business Council for Sustainable Development and Fresh, but equally across sectors with the variety of different leaders and representatives that are here at these kinds of events to create those solutions together.
Thank you, Dan. And I'd like to hear your vision. And let's remember that what the audience is interested in is the whole environment. We're thinking about how everything can change. What's your vision?
Well, our vision, our aspiration is really to enhance quality of life and contribute to a healthier future. Well, what does that really mean? It means healthier diets for individuals and families. And then it's farming and the communities. We need healthy, thriving rural communities and farmers that are farmers by choice and not just by default, by necessity. And this within the boundaries of the planet. So that is the vision, but also the major challenge.
A lot to do, but Mahmood, what I'm trying to get at here is the environment around people, the consumers, the people in the streets. What should be surrounding them? What's going to deliver the healthy and a sustainable diet?
You know, the last 2 days has been an amazing conversation of all the challenges. We've heard about some solutions, some ideas. What's great about this type of forum is it brings all these different perspectives together. And if you think about a vision, it isn't just about, okay, we've got to feed the planet, we've got to provide them with healthy, nutritious food, ideally locally grown, et cetera, et cetera. The consumer's got to want to engage. They've got to want to consume these products, make those choices. We've got to be able to be inclusive. It isn't just what's good for North America and Western Europe, but it's got to be acceptable at all the different nations in the world at their different stages of development. But let's not forget, even within developed countries, let's take North America right now. About 60 million Americans, that's a fifth of the country, is on one form or another of subsidized food from the government. That is on our SNAP programs, food stamp, what used to be called food stamp. We've got to bring them along too. They represent a huge part of this contingency, of these stakeholders. And so whatever solutions we're going to do, which means it's got to be inclusive, affordable, accessible. Often we've got cities now where we have food deserts. There's no outlet for which to us to deliver nutritious food or in terms of any types of food. So where am I going with this one vision? Let's come up with solutions that are all-inclusive, that are accessible, affordable, but at the same time preserve our planet. We've had a lot of discussion about energy, water, carbon footprint, and I'm sure you're going to come to that in a minute. How do we solve for that inclusively? That's a massive challenge, and that's what we've been hearing the last 2 days. How do we bring it together? And I hope a decade from now, when we have this sort of meeting, we'll be giving case studies of how we've done it, as opposed to the challenges we have and how we should do it.
So, Emmanuel, another big challenge there. Can you top that challenge with what you'll tell us?
Yeah, I would say from a Danone perspective, we think that the food system, the food system we know, is coming to an end, because that food system is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for the planet, and it's not sustainable for health. And why? Because it relies on an agriculture which is too much intensive, and we can't go on forever like this, because we are exhausting the soils, and because we have been going into a system which is a one-size-fits-all. Somebody was speaking about the richness of potential tomatoes variety and species, and we are using 4 tomatoes within the world. That's not possible anymore. We can't treat food as a commodity anymore. So the solution, or what does it take to go back to another system, to give birth to another system after a transition? We have to reconnect to communities, and it has to begin from the consumer and from the citizen, who is the same person. Because every time we eat, every time we drink, we actually can vote for the world we want. Mm-hmm. We need to reconnect to 2 communities. The communities of people sharing food together, because food is social. Food is not about nutrients only, about calories intake. Food is about socialization. And then we need to connect to the community of producers, because it has to be done in a different agricultural system. Small farmers, how we make a living decently, bringing food to the table. So the whole system has to change, and it does take governments, business, NGOs, people, consumers, to give birth to the new one.
Well, this is a big and bold vision, and I have to confess, if someone said that food should not be treated as a commodity 15 years ago, they would have been treated as a fringe, strange person. So the fact that this is now entering the mainstream is very interesting and very bold and very transformative. But you've got an audience to convince here. The ambition of Fresh is food systems transformation, no less. It's about healthy, nutritious diets for all, this inclusiveness element. Can you give us an example of an action that you're going to take, or perhaps already are taking, that's going to contribute in a meaningful way to this food systems transformation, and what impact is it going to have?
Yeah, and I think we've hit it. The food sector is under pressure from so many different directions. And these are issues of business imperatives, from a sourcing through to a branding opportunity that we are all working to implement the solutions against. And these are happening at the consumer level all the way back through to the farm. I'll share with you a couple of consumer-facing examples. We've got one of our team members here, Paloma, is one of the folks seconded on the Fresh work around what are the consumer insights that will unlock this. And we're using some of our own research and findings from that as well. I shared a little bit on what we're seeing in the emerging markets, but we're fortunate as Kellogg, we're primarily plant-based food company today. And what we tested was, we've got a brand in the US called Morningstar Farms, and it is a vegetarian substitute. That's where it started, for meat. But it's really so much more than that. We turned that into a vegecation campaign, #VegForAll, where people could sign on and say, I'm going to commit to 1, 2, 3, whatever their choices were, of vegetarian meals a week. And they could see exactly what that equated through to for healthier planets, less water used, less greenhouse gases emitted, and we could combine that and roll that up to help people see a collective impact. Now, that's just one brand, one example. It has to cascade all the way back through the system to the farm, as we've spoken about here, but it's a test point to see what are people willing to undertake, and what will it take to drive them and engage them, more importantly, to go further, faster, perhaps. Transparency is going to be key within all of that, and we were engaging there on new tools like openforbreakfast.com in multiple markets where we can engage in one-to-one conversations, which is really hard for companies that are our size to do. So numerous ways, but I'll leave it at that and get some other examples as well.
Thank you. So acting on consumption ripple effects through the value chain. And give us an example and show us how it's going to have impact.
Yeah, well, we've heard a lot in this conference already about food loss and waste, and if we could resolve that, we'd go a long way to getting to the ideal that we've just described. And food loss and waste is one of the streams of the FRESH programme. And we've been working many years on reducing food losses and waste, and in our factories we're very close to zero waste. But we never actually measured the waste across the entire value chain from agriculture right through to the consumer. So we took the opportunity to volunteer to be one of the pilots for the World Research Institute UNEP protocol on food waste, where they really put step by step how you can measure food waste. And we chose to do it in Pakistan for milk. Now, why that choice? Well, milk is a very nutritious product, but with a certain environmental impact associated with it. And in Pakistan, we have a very complex supply chain. We buy 275 million kilos of milk every year. And it comes through, 70% of that is supplied by smallholder farmers with just a few cows. So you can imagine the complex supply chain that gets to our factories. We've got over 3,000 chilling centres. So anyway, we commissioned Deloitte to do all the measurements for us. And they went to interviews on the ground right through to consumer focus tests. And the result was amazing. We found that only 1.4% was wasted. I mean, we almost didn't believe the numbers when we saw it because it was far lower than we'd anticipated. But how do we get there? I mean, it's really from years of working with smallholder farmers on good hygiene practices, livestock. So these are dairy hub supervisors working with groups of 100 farmers maybe, really teaching them and helping them. And then investments in infrastructure. And then right through the distribution to the consumer, the product is powdered milk and UHT milk, and consumers use it down to the last drop. So it is possible to get there, and you know, we've shown it in this supply chain. When we tried to do it for some other supply chains, like cereal supply in China, we couldn't trace everything back today. So you need to have transparent supply chains where all the partners are prepared to release the information so that you can really measure the waste and then act on it. So within FRESH, we want to share that experience, also learn from others, because there's still a lot we can do in other supply chains.
An example of multiple actions there for the same goal. So, Ekman, give us an example with some good idea about what specific impact it's going to have on transforming the food system.
So I'll focus, you've heard product examples, you've heard about food waste. Let me talk about the supply chain as an example. We've looked at our performance with purpose agenda, which looks at environment, people, product, and under the environment we look at it as planet. And we said, if you take the two examples of water and greenhouse gases, much of that has been discussed today. We looked at our footprint, and we've been leading the industry in many ways in terms of our water footprint. Actually, we won the Stockholm Water Prize 2 years ago for a 26% reduction in water use in our operating plants. But then we stepped back, and I said, we asked the question, is that enough? In fact, not surprisingly, we found 7% of our global water footprint is within PepsiCo's four walls. 93% is in our entire supply chain, most of which is on the farm. So if we as industry keep focusing on that 7%, even if we cut it in half, it's not going to move the needle significantly. It's important, but not enough. So we launched an initiative where we're now looking for all the way up the farm And we started with a pilot right here in Europe, in fact, in the United Kingdom, where we partnered with Cambridge University, the agronomy department, Oxford University's hydrology department, the United Nations, some technology companies, and we started putting our data set at the UN, eventually with the goal of taking this open source. And we said 5 years ago, could we cut water and greenhouse gas and carbon footprint on our potato farms in the southeast of England by half? By 50%. That's 50% across the system. And kicked it off as an initiative. And the goal was not to invent anything new, and I think that's the emphasis. Use existing technologies, but bring them to bear. We do a lot about talking about inventing something. Innovation is about implementation, so we implemented everything we knew. We just finished that 5-year period, and amazingly, water use was cut, and greenhouse gas emission were cut by 50%. Yield didn't go down. Profitability, of course, improves for the farmers. And we've now taken that platform, we're rolling it across multiple countries. We've already got it rolling out in 15 countries, representing almost 1 million acres already, and being housed in a data set at the UN in partnership. And I think an important learning here is so much of this can happen in the pre-competitive space. This is not just about creating IP and profit. It's figuring out collectively across industry, between industry and academia in this example I just gave you, between industry, academia, and the non-profit sector and government, because we need government to give us the framework. And if we do it, if you just take that example, and if you think about the global water footprint and carbon footprint we've all been discussing, imagine the power of that impact. So I'm not talking about theory. We've already rolled that out as a pilot, scaled it up, and now the goal is to take it in over 30 countries. My last comment on that is, this is something only industry can do. I'm not aware of any governments that within a 5-year period could come to an agreement to implement across 30 countries, currently in 15 countries, and actually agree on the terms, agree on the exchange, and exchange all that information. We've done it because we did it between private sector and across, without waiting for the framework and regulation, just because it was the right thing to do.
Interesting use of targets there and collaborative approach. Very interesting. Emmanuel.
Well, I would like to jump into the discussion about reporting because I think it's a transversal topic we're all working on. As you said at the beginning, business is challenged about its motivation and capability to achieve positive targets. So one thing we need to focus on also together is reporting. How do we measure? What are the KPIs? How do you add effort of each and every company? How do you compare that to the effort made by countries? Where are double counts? We all are reducing our water in operations, for instance, or our water footprint. Do we have exactly the same method? What is the most robust way to measure it? And same question for carbon and same question for nutrition. So I think we can participate to the discussion by building a robust way to count, to measure, and to report something which will prove the reality, the impact of what we are doing. So we are working with the UN Global Compact at a global level and with GRI, and we'll work in the FRESH platform on this topic and of course on the other ones, so that when we have solutions, we can add all the efforts we've been putting together in various countries, in various places, in various economies, and we can actually consolidate the measure of what we are doing. And just to add a quick comment, I think it's not about between corporate social responsibility anymore for any of the big companies part of this platform. It's about bringing this into the core of the business. And to give you an example from Danone, we bought a company in the US called WhiteWave, and we merged our US activity from Danone and WhiteWave into a new company called Danone Wave. We incorporated it as a public benefit corporation, meaning the purpose, the legal purpose of the company is both to make money for shareholders and to support stakeholders. And so all this reporting work will also help us report to the advisory board, which is accountable for the interest of broader stakeholders, that what we are doing is potentially beneficial to both shareholders and stakeholders.
Importance of accountability there. Thank you for that. Let me challenge you for a minute. we're interested in, EAT is interested in science-based targets, and we had one of the leading nutrition researchers on stage this morning, Professor Motaffarian. And he showed a slide that had salmon, nuts, fresh fruits, vegetables, some whole grains.
And yogurt.
And yogurt, that's true, it did have a yogurt. Danone here. Behind you, I don't know whether you can see behind you, but you've got some fresh peppers there. If we're going to accept this vision of fresh, unprocessed food as the basis of a healthy, sustainable diet, what kind of challenge does that present to you for your business models when they're based on largely processed foods? And how are you going to address that challenge? We have a few minutes, but try and keep it as brief as you can.
Sure.
Please.
You know, one of the biggest challenges I think we're all going to face with this model that we support and want to drive to, this transparency and local and bringing food as close as it can so that people remember where it comes from and recognize it and have informed choices that they have the ability to make, is we have to have enough people staying on farms. And that's going to be a challenge for us globally as well. The average age of the farmer around the world, we were speaking about this before, is over 55. And when you come into the developed markets, it's well over 60. The urbanization, we've got to come up with ways that we can keep people farming in urban settings. We've had some great examples of that, where we can keep people farming because it is the new technology and it creates excitement for them. And it's a healthy, sustainable business model overall. So these types of solutions have to take place together with the ability to unlock how we then have that broader market access driving healthy decisions. I'll share more, allow some of the other panelists to share that as well.
Well, we're fully aligned with what Darius said this morning, and this is what we've really embodied in our new set of nutrition commitments. Mm-hmm. So continuing, of course, to decrease the negatives, reduce salt, reduce sugar, but increase the positives, increase vegetables, whole grain, nuts and seeds, both actually in our products and developing products that make it easier for people to cook with fresh ingredients. And increasing micronutrient fortification. So, yeah, this is what we're working towards. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, there's an opportunity. The business opportunity here is that's where the growth is. And good businesses and good companies are going to leverage that opportunity for growth and figure out, not only from the profitability point of view, but also access and distribution. Look, we launched only 4 or 5 years ago in a partnership a hummus brand called Sabra in the US. Nobody in this room that I know of is going to debate the healthfulness of hummus. It's chickpeas and olive oil and etc. It's been going on for thousands of years. We now have the #1 hummus brand in the United States within approximately 5 years. It is tremendous growth. Our nutrition portfolio, whether it's Quaker and whole grains or the hummus example I just gave you, is growing faster than the rest of our business. But I want to add a different challenge, which is if we don't take the consumer with us, we will not be successful no matter what the intention is. Let me give you an example of a learning. A few years ago, we developed 100% biocompostable packaging for our food brand, one of our food brands. Completely, in 90 days, would disappear in the atmosphere. Everybody in this room that I know said, great, let's do it. We did. And you know what? It wasn't because it was cheaper. It was the right thing to do. We wanted to test the technology. Within 30 days of launching it, consumers started rebelling, saying the bags and the packaging was, quote, too noisy. It was too crinkly. And so they basically, and I'm quoting, said, you replaced environmental pollution with noise pollution. That was an example of not taking the consumer with us. So if we just do it because it's the right thing, if we do it because the technology makes sense and the science makes sense, without bringing the consumer along, you're not going to succeed. That's the challenge. Now, did we stop there, by the way? 5 years later, we're now launching another biodegradable packaging in 2 countries at a commercial scale to again test with more recent technology. So you have to have the patience, you have to know what to do, but you've got to also have the skill of implementing and bringing the business. That's how your business will succeed.
Emmanuel.
Yeah. Well, we kind of did what you were mentioning because Danone chose basically only healthy categories. We are there in water, we're there in yogurt, we're there in plant-based now, and then baby food and medical. So basically, I think our whole portfolio is more or less in the positive intake. Yes, of course, within the portfolio, in water, we have plain water and we have aqua drinks. These aqua drinks contain sugar, so we have a challenge how to position them. What kind of alternative do they present? Are they an alternative to water? And then it's less good than water because it contains sugar. Are there an alternative to more sugary drinks? And then maybe it's a solution bringing the consumer from a heavy sugary drink to something intermediate. How do we market them? We decided we don't market them to kids anymore because we want to market plain water to kids. So we have fun bottles we call mascot, and we only market these fun bottles with plain water to kids. So we have the good categories, the categories which make sense from a sustainable diet point of view. Within the categories, we have a whole range of products from plain to more sophisticated, for no sugar to added sugar. And I agree that we have to take the consumer with us. If you reduce sugar very quickly, it's very nice on the formulation, but the consumer don't follow. If you reduce sugar step by step, then you have the consumer with you.
So this point about consumers, we're going to have to be patient with consumers. Change is going to take time. But one might argue that consumers have been influenced over the past several decades by the behaviour of the companies. Why should we trust you? You've just got 30 seconds to tell us why we should trust you. Because you're lovely people. We're not disputing that. Tell us why we should trust you.
You know, I said this before, it's a business imperative for us, and it is really, for most of us, where our companies started. And so finding those right ways to transition that drive the right solutions that help us, yes, stay alive as a company, but more importantly, help drive sustainable solutions for planet and health is really at the core of what we have to continue to do.
Good answer.
Well, finally, the basis of all of it is the credibility of our products. So really working to continuously innovate and renovate, have healthier and more sustainable solutions. That's the only way, I think.
Look, you've heard the credibility, you've heard the integrity. We're all consumers too. At the end of the day, we want to have sustainable long-term businesses. And if we don't do the right thing, business will not continue 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now. We want to get ahead of it. By the way, we took out trans fats before the experts and regulators told us 10 years beforehand. I went to medical school right here in England. Let me just say one thing. You know, when I was training, the experts told me the best diet for me was a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet. I was trained on that. Many of us were educated that. So who do I believe?
Emmanuel.
I will give you an idealistic answer and a cynical one. So the idealistic answer is because if it's the DNA of the company, we have been saying that for 40 years. Our CEOs, the first and biggest CEO, Antoine Ribou, said that in the 70s in a very big speech, saying the responsibility of the company doesn't stop at the gates of the factory and has responsibility for the planet. So idealistic answer, we believe in it. Cynical answer, because this is the best thing you can do. Because if you want to work with us, you are going to challenge us on this path. And by discussion, by moving forward, you will take us even further than where we want to go now. If you say, well, I have nothing to do with business, you basically send us back all together to our worst practices of the market. So please challenge us in a positive way.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep on challenging them and let's keep on seeing the type of innovation we've heard about today. Thank you to the panellists. Thank you.
Yes.